Welcome to the Behind the Board on compression. We're going to be talking about compressors, everything about them from threshold to ratios and so on, explaining all of that and working with some of them on the track that we have right here. So let's start out on this kick drum track, just solo it out. Let's bring up the stock compressor, go to plugin and dynamics, because this is now a dynamic plugin, and we'll go down to the stock compressor, the Dyn3 Compressor / limiter. And we'll talk about limiting too. It's a different form of compression where it really stops things from going over a certain threshold level. So let's just talk about compression and what it is. It's kind of difficult to really get a grasp on until you start really picturing it the right way. So what goes on with compression is it reduces the dynamic field. So it takes the highest or the loudest notes and brings them down a bit, making the lower notes stand out more. I always think of it like you're standing in a room and you have a ceiling over you, and the ceiling is made sort of like a soft material, maybe like a trampoline type of material over you. So you can push your head into it and you'll go a little bit higher, but it'll always be pushing back down on you. And that's pretty much how compression goes. So put that at 5'10" and have some people in there that are 6 feet tall and some people in there at 5'8". It's going to push those people that are 6 feet tall kind of back down to that 5'10" area, making them seem a little closer together. And that's what you're trying to do with compression. As weird as the example might sound, that's what it is doing. It's kind of bringing down these tall guys, these louder guys, in with the rest of the sounds so that you get a more uniform sound at the end and nothing really pops out at you. So let's start out by explaining everything that's in here. We'll start out with the attack. The attack is how fast the compressor will engage. The release is how quickly the compressor will disengage. So it's that simple. If you want to really fast engage on the attack, you could go up to this button and you can see that we're at 10 milliseconds. So after this bass drum hit, it waits 10 milliseconds and applies compression. But you could bring it down and do it after 2 milliseconds, or go to these US times, which are even smaller, and this is almost like immediate. So this is going to be helpful for when you want things to hit hard at the beginning and then start getting compressed, like you might with a snare drum. You might not want to really pop that, or other cases you do. You really have to work with this for a while. So after we finish this video, finish explaining all of this, please go through some of the other tracks and fool around and make some sense of it. So that's attack, that's release. It's that simple. After that is ratio. The ratio is how heavily this is going to be compressed. It's going to be compressed right now at 3:1. The ratio can go right down to 1:1, which means it will not be compressed at all, and it could go all the way up to, I think this one goes to 100. Once you reach 60, that's pretty much all you could get there. Once you reach 60, it becomes a limiter, limiting thing. So you no longer have that ceiling that I was explaining that you can kind of push against and it'll push back at you. Now that ceiling's a hard ceiling and you just hit your head on it. You can't get above it. That's when you reach about 60:1 on the ratio. There's a bunch of math behind that, but it's really unimportant for what we're talking about right here. Next is the threshold. The threshold is when your compressor will start to engage. So if the threshold right now is set at 24, it's negative 24 dB. So at negative 24 decibels, and this is our threshold point right here, this little yellow arrow here. So once it reaches negative 24 decibels, the compressor will start engaging. So that's a very important part to this. Next, you have your knee, which I'll show you how that works. That's a bit difficult to explain. So I put the ratio up a whole bunch so we could focus on the knee. The knee is where this line bends. So you see where that line is right now, and the knee is at 0 dB. This is an insanely hard knee. It's not going to let anything above it. But if you change that knee up, you can see if I go, and you can see how that flattens out, how that softens the curve. So that's your knee. It's going to soften up that curve a little bit and give you a different type of compression as you adjust it. So a lot of stuff to play around with, but let's start with this bass drum track, and we'll get some good examples on when to use each one of these different elements that come with your compressor. Finally, we have the makeup gain, and I'll show you how to use that really quickly once we get this compressor moving. I'm going to bring my compressor back down to about 4 for this bass drum, 4 to 1. I'm going to bring my knee back down a little bit harder than this. I'd like it to be, let's call it 5.2 dB for right now. We will attack quickly, but I want a little bit of punch, so I'm going to leave it maybe around 5. And I want to release pretty quick too. I'm happy with the 80 millisecond release for right now. We'll listen, maybe we'll adjust that too. But let's check it out. Here's our in, and here's our threshold line. Let's make sure that that's working for us first. All right, we could use a little bit lower on the threshold. It's a tiny bit. I want this compressor to kick in a little harder. Let's check that out. We're getting there. It's starting to sound better to me. I'm still getting a lot of movement above my threshold, so I'm going to bring this ratio up, show you how that works. Let's bring that up to 10 now. And you'll see your gain reduction. That's what GR means over here. Your gain reduction is really slamming down almost every hit now, rather than some of them, because some of them weren't really punching up that hard, so it didn't hit them that hard back with the compression. And that's really what you're adjusting this whole time, is how hard your compressor is attacking the hits. So I like to get the compressor attacking the hits fairly hard on a bass drum. And you have to make your own decisions as you're mixing, because it's very much a part of mixing and how things are going to blend together. There isn't like, hey, this is the one way you should compress bass drums or so on. That's why I don't really just stay in these factory defaults. I like them. I think they do a great job. Like, we could put on this kick thump one over here, and that again is under factory default. Throw on this kick thump one over here, but you're going to want to move things around so that you can affect your sound the way you want to, because this threshold looks a little high for what we have here. Let's take a look. And if you could see, our gain reduction almost didn't even pop on. So our threshold is too high. Let's take that threshold down. Very, very cool. So this is attacking very quickly too, and it's working pretty well for us here. The next thing that happened here, there's a makeup gain. It's already up 5 dB, so you might have noticed that right when I started playing. Hey, it's louder now. That's your makeup gain. You have your gain reduction here, and you'll see how much it's reducing it. And you kind of want to make that up here in your makeup gain. You could raise it up to 5 dB. You don't have to. I suggest you do keep things pretty steady. Because then you could go ahead and change compression on something on like a pretty much finished mix and just adjust the makeup gain, and really don't have any issue with what it's sounding like anymore with where it's sitting in the mix. You just get more compression or less compression like you wanted, but it'll still be sitting in the same area volume-wise. So that is the basics of this compressor. I want to show you a few more things, and like I said, use this compressor the most. This one is a go-to. You'll use it a lot, and you'll have a lot of fun with it. So I want to show you a few more things. First of all, I want to show you what limiting would look like on this compressor. We're just going to slam the ratio up all the way to 100 to 1, and let's hear what this sounds like. You can see it is just slamming it down every time it tries to get above this minus 29 decibel state. It is really hitting it down. It's not letting it get above there too much. So that's what limiting would look like. And you could do that even more by just bringing this attack down like crazy and the release up a little bit more. You could slam the knee down, and you'll get more and more limiting as you move on through that sort of thing. So I wouldn't suggest doing a bass drum like this, but that is how limiting works. And we'll be doing limiting as we move on through mixing and mastering. We'll talk a lot more about it, but that's the theory of limiting right there. So let's get rid of this and talk about the other plugin that comes with this. This is a pretty cool one. It's called the BF76. It's under plugins, dynamics, and BF76. It's a bomb factory plugin. That's what BF stands for. And 76 stands for the 1176, which is a compressor, a nice vintage compressor that Yuri used to make. And now Universal Audio now makes the newer versions, but they model it after that. And you'll see the one thing you're really missing, and you're probably wondering right away, is where's my threshold? On these compressors, the threshold is built in. So you have an input and output knob here. And if you're not reaching the threshold, you're not seeing any gain reduction. That's where our meter is set right now, it's in gain reduction. If you're not seeing any gain reduction, you'll just bring up your input until it starts to reach the threshold. And you could compensate for that by bringing down the output an equal amount to how you brought up the input. And you could also use this as your makeup gain, your output. That could definitely work that way as well. You see this going, there are numbers here. You can dig in, you can see exactly how much you're compressing. One of the strangest things in this plugin that's probably going to drive you a little crazy, hopefully doesn't, now that I will explain it to you, the attack and the release seem backwards. It seems like 1 would be really quick and 7 would be really slow, but it's actually backwards. 7 is a very, very quick, fast attack and fast release. 1 is a very, very slow attack and release. So we're on the bass drum. We want fast attack on that bass drum. Let's put them around 5. And let's put our release maybe around 4, right in the middle. We have our ratios here. On the other plugin, we could adjust the ratio to anything we wanted, but on this plugin, you adjust the ratio between 4, 8, 12, 20, and there's one really, really cool all buttons in button. It's a little trick to get to, but we'll talk about that after we start compressing this a little bit. I'm going to compress at 8. This is an 8-to-1 compression, and we'll see our meter now. It's going to go from left to right to show us how much gain reduction is being done. So not much. We're barely making that first line there. It means that we're right by the threshold. We're not over it very much. If I bring up the input, you'll see that line starts skipping around. So now it really started dancing. Now, let me explain what the difference would be if you did this on super fast attack and super fast release. You'll see this button will come, this knob will come up quickly, but also go down quickly. And I'm going to change the release on the fly so you can see exactly what happens as I take a longer release. So at release of 1, it's almost compressing all the time because it doesn't get the time to go back down to 0, the compressor. So you have to adjust that to how you want to have it. I like to have it that it goes pretty much back down on a percussive hit like this. I like it to engage and disengage rather than just stay on. So keep that in mind as you're doing these drums. And you could go ahead and go a little bit more nuts if you're doing vocals or something like that, and you really want to make sure it doesn't pop over. And some of these notes are too loud or whatever it might be. You could adjust the release to be a little bit longer. But that's how this plugin works. And there's another pretty cool little button. I did it already there, but you just hold Shift and click anywhere in the ratio, and you see all the buttons go down. This is a really cool feature. This is something that I always wanted to hear when I was getting into production myself. I wanted to hear what this sounded like after reading about it. What engineers used to do, what audio engineers used to do in the studio, mixing engineers, all these guys, is they found a way to push all the buttons at the same time so they don't cancel each other out. Because once you press in the 4 button, The second you press in the 8 button, the 4 button pops out at you. That's just how the compressor was built. But they pressed them in all at the same time, and they would lock in all of them at the same time. And you get some funky sounding compression with all these different ratios going on at the same time. Really cool little thing. It'll probably work well on like a room mic. So let's actually put it on the room mic. Take a look at that. I'm a big fan of slamming the room mic with compression because you create kind of a different type of environment than you get on the overheads. That way you really get a pretty interesting sounding room. You get a lot of character out of it. So we'll put it like that, and let's figure that release back up. I don't want it to go like that. And we'll attack a little bit slower as well. So I'm at 6 and 6 right now. Let's take a listen to what that sounds like. All right, and you'll see, look at your peak limiter as this is playing back. You'll see that it's really only compressing when the snare drum hits. That means a lot of snare drums coming through the room mic, so you will want to compress that, but I want it to compress pretty much at all times. So I'm going to bring the input up a little bit more, and I'm going to bring my output down a little bit because I'm getting real loud here. So I'll go down to 24 with that. That would be a little bit more. If you really want to slam with compression, that's kind of the thing you'd like to do with it. But a really, really cool feature and cool sound that, you know, we really get to hear that we wouldn't have gotten to hear if they didn't include that feature. They make it a little difficult to get to. You have to know to press that shift button, but it definitely sounds cool. Now, go through the rest of this track. Play with the compression. Actually start to feel and understand what it's doing. See what these numbers are, use it in your outputs for your makeup gain, and do the same thing with the other compressor, because the other compressor will be using even more. Your presets in here are under factory default, and they have the all buttons in, which I showed you how to do, and pump, which I guess is something they want you to see. And you have your same options as all your other plugins as well. You could save your settings in here. You could do a save as. You can make yourself a lot more presets rather than the 2 that they give you. The other plugin has a lot more presets, and I suggest you use the presets as starting points, just because they are pretty on. These guys know what they're talking about when it comes to compression. They already have settings that are kind of similar. If you notice, I'll bring up that compressor plugin on the kick again to show you something that's kind of funny. I noticed while we were doing this video. When we started the video, I put that ratio up to that 8-ish area, and I was messing around and trying to get the right sound. And if you look back, you rewind the video a little bit, you'll see when I put the kick thump on, it was rolling in around the same areas. It was a little quicker on the attack, a little quicker on the release, but it's very similar. They softened the knee a bit. They brought their ratio up to 5 instead of where it was at, I think it was at 2 when we started. So they do things that sound pretty good, to be honest with you. So I like to start with them sometimes, especially if I don't have something in mind on what I want with compression. Start with some presets and adjust. You'll need to adjust because, like I said, the threshold is way too hot for this bass drum signal. So you'll need to adjust stuff like that. But you could get some pretty great sounds just by using presets, and that's why I start with this and go from there on most of my compression stuff. All right, well, thanks for being with me on this one. Have some fun with the rest of this track. There's plenty of tracks to compress, and I'll see you on the next one.